So in the previous video, I showed you a very simple script that can generate a counterstring. What we're going to do is we're going to take this script that we have as a snippet and we're going to turn this into a very simple extension that can run from Chrome. By doing that, we will learn a little bit about Chrome extensions and you can get used to doing that. So in order to create a Chrome extension, all the information you need is online, right? In the developer.chrome.com/extensions, all documentation is there. It's a little bit hard to follow when you start. So we're going to do something really simple, which is take our little script and run it. And the easiest way to run this, I think, is from a right-click context menu. I'm using Visual Studio Code to edit the files because I think it's quite a good editor. You can use whatever text editor you want. I quite like having everything in here. So I'm going to add a workspace folder here. I'm going to create a simple folder. Right, so I've created a folder called temp extension and I'm going to store all my files in there and edit them here. All we need is a folder, and the way that a Chrome extension works, I'm going to create a new file and it's going to be called manifest.json. Every Chrome extension has a manifest, and if I look up Chrome extension manifest, then we're going to see the information that we need. So it says these things are required, so let's put them in. It has to be valid JSON. There's no commas allowed, or maybe there are in the final thing, but let's. So name, this is going to be CounterString. Version 0.1. I'm going to add a description. Simple counterstring generation. Comment. So that's all that's required to create an extension. So let's open our extension in Chrome. So if I go off to Chrome://extensions, then I can load unpacked. This is what we're going to do. Load unpacked. I'm going to pick the folder that I just created and load that in. So now we've got CounterString 0.1, simple CounterString generation. And now when I create more files here, I can just click reload and it will reload. But at the moment, this extension, this doesn't do anything. So I know that I'm going to need the script that we created before in Snippets, and we're going to need a background.js file, and the background.js is where we're going to put most of our code. So I'm just going to create a folder here first called JS to hold our JavaScript files. And I'm going to go back to the snippet that we created. I'm just going to take this code exactly as we wrote it. So in the script that we had in the snippets, just in case you weren't here last time, you can see that we've got a function called reverse string. We've got a counterstring, and I'll put this on a blog post so you can copy and paste it if you want. We've got a method that will create a function that will create a counterstring, then a prompt asking us how long do we want it. We store that in a variable. We call the get counterstring function using that to generate an actual counterstring length that we want. We store that in a variable. We log that out to the console so that we can copy and paste that into other websites or text files or whatever we want. And we're also going to use document.activeElement to set the value in a field. So if we set a field beforehand, we can run this and it will hopefully automatically populate the counterstring in there for us. So I'm going to store all this in a JavaScript file under JS, a new file under my JS folder. I'm going to call that counterstring.js. Now, if I reload the extension now, nothing will happen. It would be lovely if immediately our script took effect, but that's not how it works. We have to do a little bit of work. So Chrome extensions have the concept of background scripts and content scripts. We are mainly going to use a background script, and our background script is where we're going to have the pop-up menu, and it is going to inject the code, inject the content script into the page that we're on. That's the easiest way to get started. So let me create a new file called background.js. Now if I go to the manifest file here, you can see that there's a background section. So in here it says recommend persistent false, optional, then the script. So I'm going to copy paste that to start with, put it in my manifest. So let's start with a persistent equals false, see how we get on. The reason, now I know in advance that some of this isn't quite going to work, but I'm going to show you it so that you see the issues that we're going to have. So what I actually need here is called scripts, and this is going to load in the scripts that we want into the background page that starts up, and ours is js/background.js. That's where our main code at the moment is going to be. That's where we're going to configure our pop-up menu. We're going to leave it as persistent equals false for the moment, because that's what the documentation has told us to do. So what I want in the background is I want to create a pop-up menu. So I can just do, how do I create context menus in Chrome, and it will show us. Now we can see here that the context menu has things like I want to create a menu, and we've got on clicked. We are going to use these facets, but also you can see here it says in order to do this we need to have permissions context menus. That means in the manifest.json I need to have a permissions section which is an array, and at the moment we've only got one permission that we know we need, which is the context menus. Save that. So I should now be able to use the code that we see in here. And again, this is a little bit harder to read. The way a context menu works is we create the context menu, we tell it where it will be shown. Is it on everything, when we right click on everything, when we right click on the page? Is it when we right click on a field that is editable? Is it a normal menu? Is it a checkbox, one that we click on with a little tick? Is it radio boxes? Is it a separator where we don't normally click on it? All that kind of stuff. So I will show you how to create one of these. So I'm going to assume that we might want more context menus in the future. So I'm going to say context menus, and this is just going to be an object that is going to store the context menus that I create. So I know that I want one, context menus, and I want this to be the CounterString. In fact, this is going to be the create CounterString menu. So then I need to create a menu. So the way that I do that, chrome.contextMenus.create. If I take this in here, we should hopefully see. So here's the create method. Here it is, chrome.contextMenusCreate. Now it takes an object, which is a set of properties, and a callback function. Now when you first start with extensions, none of this makes any sense, which is why see in examples. So let's first of all create the properties. So we're going to do this bit by bit. So this is a function that we call. It needs to have an object, which is our properties, and then a callback function. Now the callback function is, we don't really want it to do anything, but it's going to report errors for us if we get into any issues. So I'm just going to create an anonymous function, which is just going to be if chrome.runtime.last error, then console.error, you report an error to the console for the chrome.runtime last error.message. So what this says is create a context menu. Currently we haven't told it what is in there, and after you've clicked on it, call this function, which will report an error if there is one. So we need to do things. So these items that we're going to put in here are all described in the help documentation here. So one of them is type, which defaults to normal, so I can leave type out. One of them is title. So let me put in a title in here. So now I've created a context menu with a title, generate CounterString. Let me save this file. If I go back to extensions now, refresh this, we can see now that there's an errors message listed here. So I can click on that. Now I'll see what error messages we've got. So this is saying extensions using event pages must pass an ID parameter to Chrome context menus create. What? Okay, so if you copy and paste that into a search engine, it will tell you that what that actually means is you must set your persistent value there to true. So even though the documentation said recommended false, most things don't need that. But as soon as you start using context menus, this is persistent. So if I save this now, clear the errors, reload this, the error messages went away. So now, possibly if I go to a page, any page, we can see that I've right clicked and now we've got generate CounterString. So the menu that we created is in there, doesn't do anything, but we've created a menu. Woohoo! So we've got our first extension and it's basically working. What we need to do then is in the create, we need to handle clicks. So we do that with a event listener. So chrome.contextmenus.onClicked add listener, then it calls a function. So this is what we're going to do. So I'm going to say, all right, we've created our menu. I want to add an event listener to any of the clicks, and when you receive a trigger, I want you to call the context menu handler. So I need now to create a context menu handler. So function context menu handler. Now let's see what this has to be, because it tells us here the callback function needs to be info with tabs. So it doesn't need to be called info, but keeping it the same as the documentation there makes it easy. Let me go back. Right, so what we're interested in is the info, because it tells us what menu ID was clicked. So if I say if, because I only have one at the moment, if info.menu item ID is the menu ID that we created, which was context menus.create CounterString, then we want to create a CounterString. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say console.log menu click. Then we'll know if everything is getting wired up correctly. So I go back to the extensions. So I've saved that. No, I haven't. Save that. Go back to the extensions. Refresh the code. No errors have appeared. Now if I go in here and I do right click, generate CounterString, we said console log, so let's look in the console. There's nothing being shown in the console here. If we go up to extensions, you can see that there's a background page. So in the extensions, if I get the background page up, now we can see in the background page in the console here is the console. If I go on to a page now, move that over here so we can see it. Page, generate CounterString, there we go. The menu click count is increasing. So we can see that our menu is working. Now what we need it to do is actually do something. Now we are going to do something very simple, which is we are going to inject the content script that we've written, this counterstring.js, we're going to inject that into the running page. So if I look up Chrome extensions content scripts and look through the documentation here, we'll see that I can inject scripts programmatically. So by using the chrome.tabs.executescript, I can put code like a file, chrome.tabs.executescript file, into the running page. And to do that, I need to have the activeTab permissions. So if I go into the manifest, add a new permission, activeTab, then this code looks relatively simple. So what I need to do is chrome.tabs execute script file contextScript.js. Let's try that. So in my background.js, where instead of console.log, I can say chrome.tabs execute script, and the file is js/counterstring.js. Save that, make sure everything is saved. Go back to chrome:/extensions, reload. No errors have appeared. If there are any errors from the previous run, it's worth going in there and clearing it. So if I get up a page that has a form in it, you can see that I've got the generate counterstring here, but not when I actually click in the field that I want. Now, remember, when we were looking at the create menu documentation, there are the context types. So by default, it's page. So when I click on page, I get the counterstring. When I click on an actual element, I don't. So I really want it not on page, I want it when I'm in the element. So I think it's editable. So what I'm going to do is when I create the menu here, so we've got the title, I need to tell it the, is it contexts, different contexts. I need to tell it the contexts to show this menu, and that is an array, and I want it to be editable. So this, at the moment, this menu will only appear when it's on an editable item. Save this, back to Chrome extensions, refresh, no errors, right click, and there's my generate counterstring. So it's on editable. It shouldn't be on page now. So it's not on page. So now it's only on fields that are editable. That's pretty much what I want, because I'm going to say document.activeElement.value and put it in, and really only want that in editable items. So now let's see if that works. So we've got generate counterstring, click that. There's our dialog. This is exactly what we saw before, 100, okay. And there we go. So we've just created a Chrome extension that puts a counterstring into the area we want. Also, if I inspect this page, we'll see on the console, because we logged out to the console, the counterstring that we put in. So pretty much any page we can generate one of these counterstrings and we can copy and paste it somewhere else. Now, limits to the way that we've currently built this. Previously you saw examples. I did a search for forms. Now this form here, if I inspect this, is in a frame, right? And now if I do generate counterstring, let's say how many do you want? I want 100. Now it's generated it in the console there, but it hasn't put it in the field because it hasn't got active to that active element, because the active element is a frame. I'd have to write more code to go through the frames to find this. Remember, this code that we've got in here is incredibly simple, but most of the applications that we test won't be in frames, and this will work fine as a basic extension. But you saw how quickly it was to change the code that we had running as snippets into an extension that we can reuse. We could package this up. Other people can use it on our teams. If we want to, we could start putting this in the Chrome Dev Store and other people could download it and use it. But clearly we need to do a little bit more work to make it more robust and more generic on multiple sites. But that, with a simple manifest, and we put in just what we needed with a script, and we wrote the script earlier and tried it out, with a background.js that simply creates a menu, listens for it, then executes based on that work. I mean, you could imagine that you could write other scripts. Then you could add them as content scripts here and just create menu items for them, and that would work. So hopefully you see the basics of creating an extension there and how to repurpose some of your existing JavaScript code into very simple extensions.